means what we want as consumers, suffering losses, period after period after period, will eventually be out of business. And the control of the society's resources in the system of division of labor is removed from his hands. And this is the market's way of saying is that your talents and abilities are not meant to be entrepreneurial. It's not an insult, it's not an offense against him. It's just saying that given our human skills and abilities, our capacities and productive potentials are good in some things than another. For example, it would be nice if I was a professional athlete, a basketball player in the United States. I could potentially be making millions of dollars. But you know what? The market is basically sending me signals and has sent me. I'm not meant to be a professional basketball player. I'm too short. I don't have the agility. Okay? What has the market said I'm good for? Teaching. And I can assure you, again, my wife reminds me every day that I'm not making the millions that a professional athlete could. Okay? Because my wife could find ways to spend those millions. And she always reminds me of that too. Anyway, my wife is a wonderful person. She's not listening. Okay. So, but this is just the market's way of saying that given your skills, abilities, expertise, productive capacities, you're good for some things and less qualified to do other things. And so that's basically the market saying is that you perhaps should provide some other service, earn your income in some other way, rather than the role of entrepreneur, organizer, coordinator, planner, and director of production in the division of labor, which is the task of the entrepreneur. Again, therefore, obviously errors are made, mistakes are made, losses are suffered as well as profits earned, but the long-run process is that resource control and oversight of enterprise in the economy is constantly being shifted into the hands of the more competent entrepreneurs who earn profits and are shifted out of the hands of less competent entrepreneurs who can't make profits and may even suffer losses and are eventually nudged out of the market, and his assets, his resources, his productive property is sold off into the hands of those who think they can do better. That's the mechanism by which the market functions. Now the financial markets are the same. Financial markets are intermediaries. Okay, financial markets are intermediaries. They connect savers with investors. Okay, you earn income. Some of us save a portion of our income. In other words, we don't spend it all on consumption. Why do we save it? Well, maybe we're saving it for our education. Maybe we're saving it to start a business ourselves down the road. Maybe we're saving it because we're already planning for our own old age. Maybe we're saving it because we'd like to buy a home. But whatever the motivations, many of us choose not to spend all of the income we earn in the job at which we're employed, but we save a portion of it. And we deposit our savings within the division of labor, a financial institution, a bank, which acts as an intermediary, because rather than just have our savings sit there, we would like to lend it to those from whom we could earn interest. But it's costly to lend it ourselves. How do we know about the credit worthiness of other people in our society, or those who might like to borrow what we have as savings in other countries or in another place halfway around the world? So we hire specialists, just as we hire the specialist of the doctor or the lawyer or the barber to cut our hair. We hire a specialist who specializes in judging markets financially in terms of who might be a good credit risk, who's credit worthy, who has a decent business plan. And we and other people who save a portion of their income save it and funnel it into these financial intermediaries. And those we hire, the managers, the overseers, the lending officers at these banks, then funnel it out to those who they evaluate as credit worthy, reasonable risks, who will use your savings and my savings from the Bahamas, from America, from parts of Europe, other parts of the world, and lend to those at home and abroad who are offering a prospective rate of interest attractive enough to incur the risk of lending it to them with a degree of confidence that it will be paid back with the interest income that has been promised. And then we pay those financial intermediaries. That's part of the income the financial institution, the bank, earns. and then we receive our interest income. That's the role of financial markets in the division of labor. And there's a thing called the rate of interest. And while it acts as an incentive for us to save, the higher the rate of interest, other things held given, the more attractive it may be to consume a little less and put some savings aside because of the higher interest income we could earn down the road, or if the rate of interest goes down. It's a less of an incentive to save because there's less future income to be earned at that interest, and perhaps to consume more. But it works the same way for prospective lenders. If the cost of borrowing is high, you have to evaluate that cost of borrowing money for an investment relative to the profits you think you might be able to earn. The higher the rate of interest, the less the investment may not seem very profitable at that borrowed money. The lower the rate of interest, the more profitable the investment may seem. And therefore there's the two sides of the supply side of savings and the demand side of borrowing. And just like any other price, the rate of interest is meant to bring those two sides of the market into balance. And again, we would expect from this that while mistakes can be made, investment decisions sometimes are poor, a loan might not turn out to be profitable, and one of the lenders may not be able to pay back his loan, or at least not part of it, and that might affect the ability of the financial institution to pay out the interest payments to depositors or the dividends to the owners of the bank that they had originally hoped for, and perhaps promised in a prospectus of what they thought next year's profitability of the bank might be. We would expect in general and on average, the system would be tending to coordinate, to balance, to assure a equilibrium between savings and investment. Now, if that is the case, how could such a financial crisis arise that the United States has been plunged into, that much of Europe has suffered from, that has had its ramifications for other parts of the world, including some element here in the Bahamas? How can we explain this? What could short-circuit the system, in other words, if this is the logic of how a market economy functions? And unfortunately, where we have to look is an agency that is supposed to oversee the system, but ends up being the disruptor of the system. And that is the central banks of the world. Now, what do central banks do? Whether it be the Bank of England, or now the European Central Bank, or the Bank of Japan, or in the United States, our central bank, which is called the Federal Reserve System. The Federal Reserve, under law, in the U.S., has two functions. It's supposed to supervise the banking sector under the Federal Reserve's oversight, and it's supposed to manage the monetary system. In other words, it's supposed to prevent inflations and depressions, booms and busts. It's supposed to prevent financial crises. Yet if you look at the record of central banks, including the American central bank, over, let's say, the last century, including the last couple of cycles, there was the dot-com or high-tech boom of the late 1990s. That went bust in around 2000, 2001, and the economy in the U.S. and other parts of the world went into a downturn. There seemed to be a recovery after 2003. These bubbles that emerged in the housing market, in the investment market, consumer credit debt that accumulated, they now have those bubbles have burst. How can we explain how this has come about? Okay? And it's basically, perversely, the very attempts of a central bank to manage the monetary system and the banking system that tends to create these flaws. Now, for example, I'm going to work under the presumption that all of you have had that basic principles, micro and macro. So if I doodle some supply and demand diagrams, it's not going to look like something from the far side of the moon. Okay.